Of rain will clear southern Scotland early this morning. This will be followed by a mixture of sunshine and scattered showers, and some of these could be heavy. There'll be a mixture of sunshine and scattered blustery showers across Northern Ireland this morning. Some of these showers could be heavy, with hail and thunder at times. So showers will continue to spread eastwards throughout this afternoon before easing into the evening with clear spells developing. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo, filling your Sunday mornings with good conversation, arts and entertainment, ethical dilemmas and a sense of the ridiculous too. Following the budget statement from Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, it's predicted that living standards will fall by more than 7% over the next 2 years. It's pretty clear that you have been shafted. Is conservatism shafted too? And you can change your car, you can change your partner, you can even change your sex. But can you change the football team that you support? As the FIFA World Cup kicks off in Qatar today, why is football so tribal? And why does it inspire so much, some would say, blind loyalty? Also, if you find yourself in one of the best hotels in Paris, the sommelier may recommend not champagne, but English sparkling wine. I visit a vineyard in Hampshire that's got the French fizzing. All that to come in the next 2 hours. But first, the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The FIFA World Cup kicks off in Qatar today, the first time the event has been held in the Middle East. The opening match will see the home side take on Ecuador, with FIFA hoping action on the pitch will turn the spotlight away from complaints over the Arab nation's human rights record. England captain Harry Kane is expected to wear his One Love rainbow armband, showing support for LGBTQ people during tomorrow's match against Iran. In total, 9 countries are said to be making the same gesture. Amnesty's Nina Naveed told us she hopes the Iranian players use the platform to support women's rights.
So I very much hope that the players will do something. And if the players are not able to, because it's fair to say that professional athletes are no exception to the regime's brutality against their own people, our hope is that opposition players, so the England players, may do something in solidarity with women and girls in Iran.
The Housing Secretary has written to every English council leader and social housing provider, warning that deaths like that of Awab Ishak must never happen again. The 2-year-old died as a result of prolonged exposure to mould whilst living in social housing. The chief executive of Rochdale Borough-wide Housing, Gareth Swarbrick, was sacked yesterday due to the council's handling of the issue. Michael Gove says the country must raise the bar dramatically on the quality of housing and ensure tenants' voices are heard. Elon Musk has reinstated Donald Trump's Twitter account after putting the decision to a vote on the social media platform. 51.8% of Twitter users voted yes in an online poll that received more than 15 million votes. The former president was suspended from the social media platform in January 2021 after a pro-Trump group attacked the US Capitol. It comes just days after Mr. Trump announced his plans to run for president in 2024. Well, after negotiations through the night, an agreement has now been reached at COP27 to help poor countries deal with the impact of climate change. The so-called Loss and Damage Fund will help developing nations bear the cost of disasters such as drought and flooding. However, a decision on exactly which countries should pay has been left until COP28 next year. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres says the deal is not good enough.
I welcome the decision to establish a loss and damage fund and to operationalize it in the coming period. Clearly, this will not be enough, but it is a much-needed political signal to rebuild broken trust. The voices of those on the front lines of the climate crisis must be heard.
Well, back here, the government is denying reports that it's considering negotiating a Swiss-style trading relationship with Europe. Switzerland's trade agreements with the EU give them direct access to parts of the internal market. However, it would take the UK 10 years to change to that deal. Downing Street sources have rejected the claims. The NHS is likely to stay on a crisis footing despite receiving an extra £6.6 billion over the next 2 years. That's according to the Health Foundation, which says Thursday's autumn statement offered short-term relief, but it said the NHS will still be treading water at best. They also warn that other parts of the system, especially social and community care, are also struggling with cost pressures. The Home Office says a man staying at the Manston Migrant Processing Centre has died after becoming unwell. It's understood he crossed to the UK in a small boat earlier on this month and became ill on Friday evening. A spokesperson says there's currently no evidence to suggest he died from an infectious disease. A post-mortem is set to take place. And members of Animal Rebellion occupied Gordon Ramsay's 3 Michelin star restaurant last night. The climate activists held mock menus outlining the environmental costs of items served at restaurant Gordon Ramsay in Chelsea. The group issued a statement saying they're campaigning for a plant-based food system. A spokesperson for the restaurant called the protest incredibly inappropriate and deeply disrespectful. You're watching GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Portillo.
Welcome once again to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The Conservative government presented budget statements to the House of Commons on the 23rd of September and the 17th of November. And whilst the market reaction to the first was cataclysmic, but to the second, calm, Tory MPs were left wondering which of the two was more disastrous for them, for Conservatism and for the country. Whereas Liz Truss sounded like a Conservative when she wished to reduce the tax burden from historic heights and talked of the need to stimulate growth, as the Daily Telegraph put it, Jeremy Hunt sounded like George Osborne with his talk of austerity and acted like Gordon Brown with stealth taxes, the gleeful penalisation of wealth creation and a tax on high earners and capital gains. The Chancellor did mention the need for economic growth, but apparently that meant to him government spending on infrastructure, not releasing the entrepreneurial zeal of the British people through incentives to earn. 1 in 5 taxpayers, people earning just over £50,000, will soon pay income tax and national insurance of 42% on a chunk of their income that grows daily thanks to inflation. On top of that, you could well be paying over 6% interest on your student loan. An extra 250,000 people are dragged into paying super tax and national insurance of 47%. Kwasi Kwarteng wanted to scrap super tax, but Jeremy Hunt has increased radically the number of people who will pay it. The budget is beyond the worst scare story that the Conservatives might have concocted about how life would be under Jeremy Corbyn. And so you wonder whether the parliamentary party, which is not wholly disciplined, as we know, will accept it. If it does not, a general election remains a possibility. This budget is, in my view, not a response either to the COVID epidemic or the rise in energy prices following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, although both do deepen the crisis. The effects of both COVID and of Putin are likely to be temporary, but the rise in public spending that makes the budget statement necessary is permanent, and no party has a plan to reverse it. That is why this may be the end of Conservatism. Since the Conservatives took office in 2010, spending on the National Health Service has risen from 30% of public spending to 40%. Nonetheless, the number of treatments for patients is falling. More money results in rising waiting lists. The Tories have no plan to reform health spending or even to manage it. And that means that less must be spent on police, defence, education and controlling immigration, and that taxes must rise. I'm joined in the studio by my former colleague and former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, which is what I am too, David Mellor. And first I'm going to talk to GB News' political reporter, Olivia Utley. The mood of Conservative backbenchers will not have been improved today by the Sunday Times story talking about a Swiss relationship with the European Union. But even before that news broke, what was the mood on the backbenches about the budget?
Well, I found it quite interesting, the change that I've seen between Thursday, just after the budget dropped, and now. On Thursday, there was actually some relief among the Conservative Party. Jeremy Hunt had hinted so many times about these eye-watering tax rises and public sector cuts, particularly public sector cuts. For example, freezing public sector pay, huge cuts to capital budgets, and none of those actually materialised. And Conservative MPs seemed pretty relieved about that. They sort of felt as though, oh, maybe there's a steady hand on the ship now, maybe all the chaos is over. But then it sort of sunk in, and they've gone home and spoken to their constituents. And people aren't happy at all about this. There's an Ipsos Murray poll for the Telegraph today saying that 50% of people, just over 50% of people, feel that they're going to be worse off as a result of the statement. They're also very worried, as you alluded to in your monologue, that there's no real case for voting for the Conservative Party anymore at all. There was talk about a growth plan in the budget, but it was all about top-down growth. It was all about the Conservatives investing in big infrastructure projects, in skills, government investment, rather than releasing sort of entrepreneurship and investors to make their own businesses better. There was no help for commuters, for example, and people who want to get to work. The only thing, in fact, that we will see being raised is the fuel duty, which is very worrying for the vast majority of the population who need to drive to get to work. There was no deregulation of childcare, which makes it much easier for people to work. There was no help for entrepreneurs, for investors. And that is very worrying to Conservative backbenchers who feel as though, what are they offering that's any different from what Keir Starmer's party will be offering at the next election?
To be worried is one thing. What are they going to do with their votes?
Well, yeah, I mean, what Nadhim Zahawi is saying this morning is that they're sort of changing tack a little bit and saying that, yes, before the next election, they will be prepared to cut taxes. He said they don't have a hope in hell of doing it before inflation comes down. But it's possible that Conservative MPs think, well, this is our best bet. We'll just have to hope that Jeremy Hunt's plan, which seems to be to get through the recession quickly and come out the other side just before the election to a point where they're able to start lowering taxes. It's possible that Tory MPs will hold out for that, but lots of them will just be looking elsewhere. I've heard multiple Conservative MPs now saying that they don't want to stand at the next election at all, and there are SPADs leaving in their droves.
And if the chairman of the Conservative Party is saying that taxes are going to be cut before the next election, they risk undoing the one thing that they presumably achieved, which is steadying the markets. David, you've heard Olivia and you've heard me in my very pessimistic monologue. How do you react?
Well, I mean, I agree with every word that's been uttered so far, and it's not a familiar situation for me. I think that it was a very dishonest document that was published in the week. Very dishonest, because it tried to claim that effectively taxes remained where they were, whereas we know there's been a big hike. And I find stealth taxes not the right way for a Conservative Party to do its business. I also think, I mean, I don't know who wrote Jeremy Hunt's speech. One suspects he didn't. At least one hopes he didn't. But some of this stuff about unearned income. I mean, you will remember unearned income. I remember unearned income. That was the excuse that Dennis Healey gave for having the tax on unearned income, so-called, 98% when we started in politics in the late 70s. It's a disgrace, actually, because unearned income is such a socialist concept. It's not unearned. It's been earned by people who then choose, instead of shucking it away, to actually save it. Tax has been paid on that money. And I just thought this was a pretty despicable document.
Let's go back to the stealth taxes, because, of course, stealth taxes work very well during periods of high inflation. Because if prices are going up by 10%, people's wages will go up at least by some percentage. So all these people who get more pay, because the thresholds at which they pay the higher rates of tax are not moved, many more people tumble into the 40% rate. Many more people, of course, will start paying tax at all. And with the change in the threshold for the top rate of 45%, quite large numbers of people will tumble into that as well. I couldn't think of less conservative measures than these.
I know. And in fact, you know, I well remember Nigel Lawson taking the top rate of tax, putting the top rate of tax at 40%, and 1.8 million people were paying that. Now, paying this new top rate, 8 million will be.
Yeah, 1 in 5.
Yeah, and I mean, look, what is also, I think, pretty despicable about all of this is the failure to grasp that you cannot raise taxes unless you are serious about cutting public expenditure. There was a hike in public expenditure of just under 10 billion in this document. And also, they haven't got any guts. They're gutless, because what they were particularly gutless, was in not having any savings in public expenditure until the third year, i.e. when they hope an election will be out of the way.
Did you notice that statistic that I threw into my monologue, that health spending has gone from 30% to 40% of public spending under the Conservatives since 2010? And actually, the numbers of procedures being performed on patients is falling. This seems to me fundamental. A failure to grip the health budget or to require any improvement in efficiency is the doom of Conservatives.
That's the point. And you
used to be a health minister, I think.
I did. And one of the things I worked on when I was a health minister was to try to deal with the differences between performance levels of various hospitals. For instance, we had no difficulty finding hospitals. If you remember that the star at that time was Sir Magni Yacoub, the heart surgeon. He was doing more complex heart procedures in a week than a lot of what I would call hammer and chisel general surgeons were doing in a lot of hospitals up and down the land. And when I left the health service, I thought, health ministry, I thought that we'd set in train getting a grip on that. But they don't. And then they're talking about the problems of inequalities of performance as if this was some wonderful, light that had penetrated their darkness. It was a great new idea. It wasn't.
We hope to talk to a health minister later in the programme, Will Quince. You've heard what we've been saying here. I mean, it has been assumed that electing Rishi Sunak sort of stemmed the crisis. And that the Conservatives would now muddle through to the next election, which presumably will be as late as it possibly can be from the Conservative point of view. Should we have any doubt about that?
I think still the most likely situation is that the Conservatives do muddle through. There's definitely a lot of anger on the Conservative backbenchers, but it seems to be sort of bubbling below the surface at the moment. One thing which I keep hearing is there are plenty of Conservatives who are very, very worried about the policies of higher tax and saying that who would vote for a Conservative Party which wants a larger state when you've got the Labour Party doing exactly the same thing. But another thing they're worried about is the rhetoric. One MP was saying to me, and definitely wouldn't consider him on the right of the Conservative Party, that Jeremy Hunt's rhetoric is of managed decline. And if you don't give people in a very basic way something to hope for when they're voting in the next election, even if they don't vote Labour, they just won't come out and vote. And that's a big worry in the Conservative Party, that it's going to be very, very low turnout at the next election. I think that Conservatives know which side their bread is buttered now, and the prospect of total electoral oblivion 6 or 7 weeks ago has focused minds. So I think they will keep those mutterings sort of below the surface for the time being, and I think we probably will muddle through to the next election, as you put it, but that is by no means certain.
Olivia Utley, managed decline, as you put it, and I think that's a topic we're going to pursue in the next part of the programme. David, lovely to see you as well. Thank you so much for coming in and giving us the benefit of your wisdom. Coming up, 18 months or even 2 years, the forecasters may disagree on the timescale, but the consensus is that the United Kingdom will be in recession for the foreseeable future. With a brewing rebellion on the right of the party over Jeremy Hunt's fiscal policies, are young people put off voting Conservative? That's after the break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking. My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back. The Bank of England says that the United Kingdom will be in recession for the next 18 months. The Office of Budget Responsibility says it will be shorter. Either way, we are in for tough times, and young people in work will pay more tax and need to fund higher energy bills and probably higher rents too. With inflation as high as it is, student loan repayments have risen too. How do those unusual young people who have backed the Conservatives in the past view the government now? I'm joined by Young Conservatives Jess Gill and Reem Ibrahim.
Ibrahim, that's...
There we are, I've got it. Let's begin with you, Reem, as a consolation for getting your name so muddled. What's your reaction to the budget, to the autumn statement? You must be, because I've spoken to you before, not very pleased.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's incredibly depressing to see the government suddenly now commit to huge amounts of taxation. We now have the highest tax burden on British record. It is just absurd that this is coming from a so-called Conservative government. Now, my primary issue with this is actually the way the tax burden is being shifted. The budget is incredibly redistributive, but this is no Robin Hood moment. The money is being stolen from young, hard-working people, well, not just young, all hard-working people, and being shifted, that money is being redistributed to those on universal credit and also pensioners. Now, I understand that many of these pensioners have paid into the system, and so they deserve to get that taken out. But unfortunately, what this has resulted in is that the triple lock means that they're getting much more than they would otherwise be getting if it wasn't for this incredible high inflation.
So it's generationally unfair. I've been thinking a bit about marginal tax rates this morning. Are you paying a student loan yet? No.
No, I don't go to university.
You don't go to university. But just help me think about a student who has managed, after graduating, to earn enough money to start repaying the student loan. That's now gone up to, I think, 6.3%. It depends what system you're on. And they'll be paying their income tax as well. I mean, young people then, taking into account the student loan, will be paying some of the highest marginal tax rates of all the population.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a statement that completely hurts young people. It's painful to see my friends who have just gone out to university, hoping to get into employment, finally get a job, and then they're hit with hard tax and also these other negatives that come, like with inflation, for example. It's completely unfair to young people. Why do we have to foot the bill so boomers can get a 10% increase in their pensions? I don't think that's fair. Young people are struggling choosing between heating or eating, struggling to pay their rent. Mortgages to buy a house, that's completely out of the picture. I don't think this is a long-term plan.
But what is the alternative? Because the sort of budget that you approved of more was put to us in, I think it was on September the 27th, just a couple of months ago. You saw the market reaction. It became impossible. It led to the sacking of the Chancellor and the resignation of the Prime Minister. So you're not being realistic, are you?
I mean, to me, this is an issue of morality. I don't think it's fair to young people to have to pay this high tax burden when we need to focus on, buying a house. We need to focus on settling down, having children as soon as possible. I think that's how you create a stable economy. And to be hit with this massive tax burden, to be hit with inflation, to be hit with an increase in student loans, I don't think that's fair. I think taxation is it's theft, isn't it, realistically? And this Conservative government has proven that they don't care about young people. I think the Conservative Party should die, quite frankly, because, they're not Conservative, they're not for the free market. What do they actually stand for? I think this is the first Conservative government to not have a vision in a long time. I think Thatcher would be so disappointed.
I'll just remind viewers that we're talking to two young Conservatives here.
Yeah, so I think maybe resigning your party membership might be the first step of killing off the party. But look, I think that this is unrealistic. We've got to think about, young people. We can sort of sit and cry and say that the tax burden is incredibly high, which it is, and we are struggling as a result of it. But the solution was this long-term free market solution, right? Liz Truss had the right idea, but she went too hard and fast, no OBR forecast. Of course, the markets were going to react badly. I think what we forget again, also, another reason why the markets reacted so awfully was a result of this huge amount of spending with the energy price guarantee. It's essentially a socialist energy policy, right? It's a blanket approach. We're looking at energy across the board, and every single unit of energy use is being subsidised in the exact same way, no matter where you come from, no matter how much money you actually have yourself. So I think that actually the solution is to look at pensions, look at the energy price guarantee, look at where we're spending our money and means test it. Only those that need it are able to actually get that subsidy from the taxpayer. Everybody else that can afford it, pay it themselves. So the tax burden is not lying on young people.
What about the National Health Service? It seems to me that this is the cuckoo in the nest. I mean, 10 percentage points of public spending is a very large amount of money. And of course, it has squeezed out defence spending, education spending, police, immigration spending, and it's leading to tax rises. And yet the Conservative Party seems to have shown no interest in managing the health service budget. I mean, we heard David Merrill making a perfectly reasonable point there, that there is best practice, well, there certainly used to be best practice, that ought to be replicated across the system. I hear no move towards that at all.
I think the NHS is this sort of sacred cow that any time anybody tries to reform it, you'll know this very well with Thatcher, she didn't dare touch the NHS.
Correct.
And so I think that it's incredibly politically impossible to actually reform the NHS in any way. In my view, the NHS needs serious reform, and I mean institutional reform, free market reforms. Let people choose what kind of healthcare system that they would like, rather than it being completely... You know, the NHS is like a bubble, it's being blown up and we pump more money into it, and it's a broken system. It's a bureaucratic black hole that we keep throwing taxpayer money at.
Jess, if you are in despair, and you've told us very clearly that you are you off to a different party? Is there a different party? Could there be a different party in the future?
Well, I'm not very hopeful about other parties. Honestly, I'd like to see more from Reform and Reclaim, but I've not really seen that which will make me vote for them. I don't think I'll vote Conservative if I do it, because I really like my MP, Chris Green. I think he's a really cool guy. But generally, this is the issue, and I think this is why we need PR. Because we've been stuck between these two parties which basically stand for the same thing, and it's basically socialism, let's be honest. And I think to young people, Thatcher won the youth vote, didn't she? And I think young people want a vision, they want something radical, and I think the Conservative Party should embrace that.
I understand some of what you're saying, but I would have thought PR would be exactly likely to produce this sort of, middle-of-the-road social democracy where you can't distinguish the parties. That's what we've got at the moment.
I think it will give smaller parties more representation.
Smaller parties, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the way forward. I think the Conservative Party need to suffer for what they've done to this country, quite frankly. And I say that as a young Conservative.
Very, very powerful stuff from Jess and Reem. The FIFA World Cup starts in Doha today. Why? The world has given support to an authoritarian regime in Qatar with a miserable record on human rights and which criminalises homosexuality. The need to play there in the northern winter has disrupted European league schedules. We all suspect that corruption was involved in the choice of Qatar. Most of us regret the decision, and now that may include Qatar, since it's enduring massively negative publicity at the moment. Football fans will be wanting to get on with the matches. Bill Shankly, the celebrated Liverpool football manager, famously said, "Some people think that football is a matter of life and death. I don't like that attitude. I can assure you it's much more serious than that." Why does football inspire so much tribalism in fans? Why are they so loyal? And is that the same when it comes to the national team? We'll discuss that in a moment, but first let's join GB News reporter Paul Hawkins in Doha. Paul, are the fans in Qatar still reeling from the extraordinary press conference given by FIFA chief Gianni Infantino, or are they now focused on the football?
Loving that pronunciation, Michael. I wouldn't say the fans are reeling from what he had to say. Certainly it's been picked up on that extraordinary press conference that he gave yesterday, when he basically accused the West of hypocrisy. I think from talking to the fans here, they have a more balanced view than you're getting from the British media. Amongst the British media and the journalists and the world media, to be fair, there's a lot of talk about human rights, a lot of emphasis on that, and understandably so. And the people here, the expats who live here, the fans that have travelled here say, yes, there are issues, of course there are, but there is a more balanced picture that we're not picking up in the media. There are some good things about this country. It has made some progress. When you look at, for example, example, migrant workers, right, the introduction of a minimum wage, and also the establishment of a contract that means that you can switch employers. So there is some progress on social issues here, but certainly the fans are saying, yeah, the accommodation hasn't been up to scratch in some places. I spoke to some Welsh fans earlier who said they're staying in the kind of fans area, the very cheap end of the accommodation here, and they described it as like living in a caravan. They said that yes, it's cheap. It's not going to be great, but it's still decent. You've got decent Wi-Fi, you've got air conditioning, it's cool, we've got access to drink. And actually, when I talk about drink, they're talking about water, but speaking to a lot of the fans here, they're not too fussed about not getting hold of alcohol either, given the high temperatures and given the fact that this is a country where, you know, alcohol is against Islamic law and you can only drink it in certain areas. So speaking to the fans here, they're very excited. It's very strange being in such a small country, the size of East Anglia, effectively, where there are so many games and so many fans in such a small area. Spoken to some England fans earlier, some of them are going to up to 24 games during this tournament because the venues are in such close proximity. The next World Cup is in Canada, Mexico and the USA, and they're saying, look, we're simply not going to get to do that when it arrives there. So it's also a very short World Cup, the shortest since 1978. So there's a lot to pack in over the next few days, and yes, we're going to hear lots about social issues, the treatment of LGBTQ plus people, migrant workers, etc. But the fans are also saying, look at the brighter side of football. It's bringing a lot of people from very different cultures together, and in a country that is not used to this volume of people and this variety of people. So this is about as much about a new experience for the Qataris themselves as it is for the fans that are here.
Thank you very much indeed. Live from Qatar with the fans assembling behind you. Well, former football agent and author of The Deal, John Smith, is with me in the studio, and joining us from the Netherlands is Mark van der Voogd, Professor of Psychology and author of FC Sapiens. John, I'll come to you first. Tell me about your own tribalism to begin with.
Oh, if you cut me, I bleed red. I mean,
Arsenal.
Yes.
Yes.
It sort of drops through the generations, really. And
in your case, how many generations?
3, just before the war. Yeah, three generations, and my children. So, and in my world of when I was a football agent, I probably did more deals with Tottenham Hotspur than I did with Arsenal. So it was, you begin to feel like you're a little traitor, but because it's in you, it's completely tribal. You know, the most amazing thing you can change your partner, you can change your house, you can change your car, you can change your sex, but you never change your football team.
But is that literally true? Don't some people change their football team over their lives, no?
Rarely. I mean,
if they move from one part of the country to another, no?
No. It's ingrained. Unless you support a lower team. I mean, forgive me, everybody in Hartlepool, but unless you support Hartlepool, which I like, by the way, it's a nice place. But, you know, you might want to support Liverpool as well, so you get both ends of the spectrum.
So it can be, as it were, hereditary. You can get it from your parents.
Oh, it's absolutely hereditary.
But presumably, but it might otherwise, I suppose, be the place where you were living when you first became conscious of football. So if you're a 5-year-old boy or something, and even though your parents are Arsenal supporters, if you happen to be living in, let's say, Hartlepool, you might become a Hartlepool fan.
For sure. And there's lots of people who watch their first game on television and it's Liverpool or it's Manchester United. Manchester United seem to garnish a lot of supporters that way because it's the first game that you saw.
Yeah, an absolutely global force.
That's right.
Mark, I hope I pronounce your name correctly. You've studied the psychology of why football fans are tribal, and it's about tapping into primitive feelings, I think. Tell me about this psychology of this tribalism.
Yeah, so our ancestors, of course, they were hunters and gatherers, and occasionally they went out raiding into other tribes' territories. And football sort of exploits all these tribal instincts. And that means that it's a team game. We play it in coalitions, and for the bonding within the team, we actually need other teams to be our enemies. And so football exploits that, and that explains also the popularity for football. And our thesis in the book FC Sapiens is that there is a relationship between football and war, very much like Bill Shankly said, and Rinus Michels, the Dutch coach, he said football is war. And actually that is true. And that means actually that the more football there is played, the less opportunities there are for actual warfare. So football is a pacifier in society.
That's an interesting point, Mark, but I wonder whether it's good for the individual, because, of course, people suffer the highs and lows of their team winning and losing. Here, for example, there's been a warning that children and women are in more danger during the World Cup because their partners may be aggressive and disappointed and drunk and so on. So psychologically, are there more benefits or disbenefits to the individual from being a tribal member of a supporter, of supporters of a team?
Well, I think it's a sort of balanced picture. Of course, I mean, football fans play a war in themselves. Of course, it's played in the stadium, outside the stadium sometimes. And so they play their own game. And if you look at, for example, the hormonal profiles of the football fans, they come and go with what the players do. Testosterone increases during the game, cortisol increases. That means actually that there are winners and losers effects, pretty much like the teams on the pitch. And that could be unhealthy indeed. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that children and women are at risk, but football fans themselves, they suffer from the hormonal changes, but they don't really translate it into any physical activity. And so if they experience the emotions the same way as the footballers do, but they drink the beer and the chips with it, they actually have an increased risk of any heart failures. And so at important matches, it's been documented that there is more older men going into the hospital because of presumed heart attacks, for example.
And John, in the UK, we've been making light of this. We've been making light of using the word war. But in the UK, for example, in Glasgow and in Liverpool, people support different teams partly according to their religion. Should we be worried about this, that football teams, to some extent, emphasise the sectarian divide?
Yes, because it's tribal. So there is obviously that there is that connotation, although it's less today than it has been over the years. The one thing I would say, though, is we've talked a lot about the economic situation and eat or heat. I think there's another dimension here as well. I think it's eat, heat, or can I keep my seat? Can I afford my Sky subscription? Football will be the repository of a lot of people's emotions during these dark winter days when the economy and the world around us is very tough. Football will be the explosion of where you send your emotions. It used to be years ago, go to church, go to synagogue, go to a mosque, wherever you went. It's not that anymore. Football is the repository of our emotions in 2022.
So we've been talking about religion and war in the context of football. Thanks to Mark van Vugt and to John Smith. Well, look, returning to politics, as I said in my introduction, spending on the NHS has increased, with patients seeing little benefit from the extra funding. Will Quince MP is Minister of State for Health and Secretary Care, and he joins me now. Mr. Quince, lovely to talk to you. How are you?
Morning, Michael. Very well, thank you for having me.
Professor Jonathan Beard, who has been a full-time consultant vascular surgeon for 30 years, says that when he started working 30 years ago, he was able to do twice as many operations as he's able to do now. I think he may have retired, as he was able to do when he was retiring. And this is because of bureaucracy and inefficiency in the health service. How, after so many years of Conservative government, can bureaucracy and inefficiency in the health service be making a surgeon cut his list to 50%?
Well, I'm genuinely surprised to hear that, and I'd love to meet with him to find out exactly why he feels that way. I mean, surgery is more complex. We're treating far more conditions with technology, which probably does make procedures. We also have a bit longer. We also have far more safety measures in place than perhaps we did just a handful of decades ago. Look, there's record investment going into the NHS. You and I both know that. But of course, there are efficiencies to be found. We spend huge amounts of money on commissioning, both at a national and local level. There are layers of management. As part of the package, the Chancellor did make clear that although there's more money going into the NHS, that extra £3.3 billion for the NHS alone, then an additional £2.8 billion for social care, we also have a big role to play in finding efficiencies. And you'll have noted the Secretary of State and the Chancellor announced that Patricia Hewitt is going to come in, former Labour Health Secretary, is going to come in and help us at an integrated care system level, make sure that we are driving through those efficiencies.
A 29-year-old woman that I know, who's, moderately successful in her career, will now be paying a marginal rate of 52%, taking into account the 40% tax rate, the 6% that she's paying on her student loan, and the 2% of national insurance. 52% being levied as a marginal rate on a 29-year-old. Is that conservatism?
Well, it's Michael, it doesn't sit comfortably with me. I know it won't sit comfortably with you, but is it a fair and balanced approach given the circumstances that we are in? I think it is. What is conservatism? It's living and spending within our means. It's about not passing debt on to future generations. It's also about protecting the poorest, lowest paid and most vulnerable in our society. And fundamentally, it's got to be about tackling inflation, which makes us all poorer. So, of course, none of us want to be increasing taxes. I completely understand why many will have been disappointed. But was it a fair, reasonable and balanced and right thing to do, given the challenges that we face? I think it was.
Mr. Quince, I've highlighted this morning that health spending under the Conservatives since 2010 has gone from 30% of public spending to 40% of public spending, squeezing out public spending on other issues and forcing you to put up tax. Unless you control health spending, this is the end of conservatism.
No, it isn't, and I think that's in part because health is one of the biggest priorities of the British people, and also health is inextricably linked with growth and the health of our economy. So it's important that we are spending that money to make sure that our population is getting the healthcare that it needs. We are a aging population. We're living with long-term health conditions. We're all living longer. That is a great thing, but it means we have to fund it, and we have to fund it well. That's why NHS funding has increased and will continue to increase. It's a priority for the people, so it's also a priority for this government. So I hear what you're saying, but I think given that it is such a big priority and it's inextricably linked with the health of our economy, then inevitably I think it's important that we should continue to invest in it.
Minister, I think you're in a very important position to see what you can do about getting some control on health spending. Will Quince, MP, thank you so much for joining us on GB News. Coming up after the break, Julian Lloyd-Webber will be here to discuss the everlasting appeal of classical music. That's after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My next guest made his professional music debut just over 50 years ago in September 1972 at the Queen Elizabeth Hall in London. In a very long and distinguished career since, Julian Lloyd Webber has worked with many other musical greats from Yehudi Menuhin to Sir Elton John. As a cellist, he's performed with many of the world's greatest orchestras, including every leading symphony and chamber orchestra in the United Kingdom. Now, retired from playing, he champions young classical musicians with the Classic FM Rising Stars initiative, showcasing 30 young musicians under the age of 30. I can't say what a pleasure it is to have you here, Julian. Tell me a bit about the needs of young musicians and what it is that you can do for them with this Classic FM initiative.
Well, that programme started really through lockdown because I was principal of the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire at the time, and I was aware, how hard these musicians practice, sometimes 6-7 hours a day, and I thought that the young musicians who were starting out were just having a terrible time because there was suddenly no outlet for their talent, and financially they were making suddenly no money. And I'm talking internationally here. And so I went to Classic FM with the idea of focusing on, in one programme, focusing on musicians under 30, who maybe just made their first recording, were just coming out into the profession, and they went for it. And
what is it you can do for them? You give them exposure, do you?
Yes. I mean, that's the one thing that they didn't have. When they work, I think people sometimes don't realise how selfless, actually, a lot of young classical musicians are, because it's not something you go into thinking you're going to make lots of money. I mean, in very rare occasions that happens, but basically, I think that they do it for the love of the music, and they want to bring it to people, so suddenly when you can't, it's quite a horrible thing. And I mean, I experienced that for myself when I had to stop playing. I had a herniated disc in my neck, which reduced the power in my bowing arm. And suddenly, and it was a very sudden thing, really. And then it makes you question your whole being, your whole self,
yes.
Who you are, what you're doing. And I just felt, well, I had a fantastic 40 years of playing, but those ones starting out didn't have that opportunity.
What is the exposure you give them then? Is it on Classic FM, or is it in some way that you're arranging public performances for them?
Well, what happened was that, of course, at that time there weren't any public performances. So we did 5 programmes that featured 6 artists each week, and we played their recordings and talked about them. Then Sky Arts came in on it, which is really exciting, and we've just actually done a second programme which was shown last Thursday, and they picked 6 out. And each year there's going to be another one.
Are these all instrumentalists or vocalists as well?
No, vocalists, the whole range. Vocalists, instrumentalists.
Well, what do you think about the health of classical music and the people who support it? There's been this announcement provisionally that Apple is going to start a classical streaming channel. We can, of course, already stream classical music on other streaming platforms,
yes.
And I do. One of the things I find, by the way, is that it's very difficult to get proper information on the streaming platform about what you're listening to, which orchestra, which conductor, and so on. It's quite difficult to find that on regular streaming platforms. But are you quite encouraged by the idea that classical streaming platform is going to be launched?
Yes, I mean, I'm in favour of anything that brings access to classical music. I mean, it's one of my bugbears, really, that I don't think that we have the music education we deserve in schools, because I think good music of whatever genre should be for everyone, for every young person, and not just the ones whose parents can afford to pay for expensive instruments and expensive tuition. So anything that brings wider access to classical music, I support. And in fact, during lockdown, it was very interesting that so many people turned to classical music, and all the streaming services and the radio stations reported a big increase in listeners. And I think that might be one of the reasons that Apple have come in on it.
They're reporting quite high percentages of people under 35 who are accessing classical music.
Yes.
Of course, it may be that older people tend to access streaming services less than younger people, so there may be a bias in that. But it looks like lots of younger people are interested in it. You raise a very interesting point there, a very sad point. Presumably the cost of living crisis is going to have an impact on young people learning music in schools.
Well, it could. Sadly, I'm afraid I think it will. It shouldn't. I feel very strongly that people are good at different subjects. People are good at maths and things, but not everyone's good at the same thing. And you see people somehow think that music is a profession that is just something that is nice to have, not to say. Look at the success of Adele in Las Vegas. And look at people like Elton John. They came through state schools.
Yes.
And we used to have a music education
and classical
system.
music, in the case of Elton John.
Elton, yes, he was at the Royal Academy.
Yeah.
But they came through state schools. And people forget that we actually had a music education system that was the envy of the whole world. I mean, when I went
and now, what do we have now?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, it's much stronger in countries in Europe and Germany, the Far East especially. I'm afraid to say that they've overtaken us in that way.
And what is a parent expected to contribute to a student's education while they're at school, their music education while they're at school?
Well, I mean, you've never heard anyone say, I wish I hadn't learnt an instrument. You know, I just think that because it's not always in the schools, it's very good if parents can try to interest their children in subjects that are not necessarily taught at school all the time.
But you may have the cost of the instrument and extra tuition, because presumably if you're going to be outstandingly good, you not only need to practice a lot, you also benefit from extra tuition.
Well, that's the thing. And I mean, at one point it used to be completely free. I mean, when I went to the junior department of the Royal College when I was 9, I remember nearly every other student that came there was from a state school. And now that's completely reversed. It's a very sad situation.
You're doing something very interesting with Bach suites. Tell us what it is that you're doing.
As I can't play myself, I came up with this idea with my wife, who's an excellent fellow cellist, Jiajing. She specialises in Bach, and so we had the idea to go out and reveal the story behind these incredible cello suites for solo cello. They're the first works ever written for the instrument. Nobody knows why he wrote them. Suddenly 6 masterpieces, and for 200 years nobody played them at all. No one played them at all.
They were sort of lost, weren't they?
Yes. It wasn't until Pablo Casals found a copy in a second-hand shop in Barcelona in the late 19th century that he started to play them and eventually recorded one of them. And at that point, everyone took them up. So it's an incredible tale to tell. And
well, it is an incredible tale to tell, but there's not much tale to tell, because I don't think we even know when Bach wrote them, do we?
We know roughly. There's no manuscript surviving in his hand. In fact, that's quite a funny story, because there is one in Anna Magdalena, his wife's hand. And eventually this scholar in Australia came out and said, well, it can't be by Bach, it's got to be by Anna Magdalena, because there's no manuscript. And also, he said rather chauvinistically that the first suites are immature. I wish I could write some immature music like that.
Yes. But tell us, there's a mystique about these Bach suites. Why so? What is it that makes cellists like you, and indeed musicologists generally, so fascinated by this body of work that he did?
The extraordinary thing is they are literally the first pieces of music written for a solo cello. And the mastery of them and the profundity of the music and the extraordinary technical mastery of what a cello could do when actually nobody really knew. It's extraordinary. And I mean, they're so popular now. They're ringtones, they're on TV ads. Really. I'm not joking.
Because they, am I right, they tend to come in 6 movements, and some of these movements are described as dance movements, aren't they?
They are. But it's quite strange that he chose to do that, because even at that point, the sort of suite in dance style was thought to be slightly outdated. But then you get these preludes, which are really like organ extemporations. They are certainly not dance music in any sense. So they're incredible pieces. And really astonishing.
Don't they take us through a range of emotions? Don't they take you up and take you down and wring you out a bit?
They do. And I think that's the fascination everybody has with them. And of course, the other thing was that in the manuscripts that survive from that time, there are no markings, there's no dynamics, there's no expression marks. So it's carte blanche, really, for a performer. And no one can say, oh, well, Bach didn't mean you to do that because you're playing pianissimo and it should be really loud. They can't say that because there's no markings in the music.
We've been talking about music and young people, and I detect this extraordinary passion that comes out of you when you talk about music, and the sadness that came into your eyes when you talked about having to stop playing your cello. Say something to young people about why music can be so rewarding, but both as an entertainment but also as a profession.
Well, I think it can bring something very special into your life, you know, especially in these times, and we saw that in lockdown, people listening to classical music more. It can be a huge solace, it can, and it can inspire you. It's a wonderful thing to get to know, and I've never been one to say, oh, you know, everybody's going to take music up. It's a knowledge, really, of these great works of human beings.
I've really enjoyed talking with you so much. It's such a great pleasure. So the Bach, is it a Bach tour?
Yes, we're booking into festivals in the summer. We're already doing Harrogate, Kings Lynn, Lichfield, you know, and I think it'll be fun. I'll be back on the road again.
Yeah, you'll enjoy that. And the classic FM movement to help young musicians, that goes on.
It does.
Let's hope from year to year.
Thank you, Michael.
Julian, best wishes with all your work. Well, coming up in our next hour, we will continue our arts theme as funding for the arts has had a major shake-up. Is it right that the money should be leaving London? And as you unwrap the latest celebrity autobiography on Christmas Day, we find out about the role of the ghost writer. That's all after the weather.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK will be wet and cloudy in the east with rain clearing, sunshine and showers in the west. Here are the details. Across southwest England, after a dry start to the day, blustery showers will spread eastwards. These could be heavy at times, with a risk of a thunderstorm for western coasts. Cloud and rain will linger across southeast England at first, though once this clears, it will be a dry morning with some sunny spells. There'll be a mixture of sunshine and scattered blustery showers across South Wales this morning. These showers could be heavy and thundery. After early rain and cloud clears, it will be a dry and fine start across the Midlands, with sunny spells. Scattered showers that could be heavy at times will affect the west later. Cloud and rain will clear northeast England through the first part of the morning. This will leave a dry period with some sunny spells ahead of showers moving in from the west later. A band of rain will clear southern Scotland early this morning. This will be followed by a mixture of sunshine and scattered showers, and some of these could be heavy. There'll be a mixture of sunshine and scattered blustery showers across Northern Ireland this morning. Some of these showers could be heavy, with hail and thunder at times. So showers will continue to spread eastwards throughout this afternoon before easing into the evening with clear spells developing. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. We have another hour of topical discussion, arts and culture. And to round off our time together, we're going to have a little bit of English sparkling wine. Coming up, there's been a seismic shift in the funding of the arts in the name of levelling up that has left some organisations very unhappy. What kind of art should be funded in such tough times as these? And with the market for autobiographical books exploding in the run-up to Christmas, we'll look at the art of ghost writing. That's all coming up after the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning. It's 11 a.m. Here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. In the US, 5 people have been killed and 18 injured in a shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs. According to a statement on the club's Facebook page, a number of heroic customers were able to subdue the male shooter. They're describing it as a hate attack. Police officials say a suspect is in custody and receiving treatment for their injuries. The FIFA World Cup kicks off in Qatar today, the first time the event has been held in the Middle East. The opening match will see the home side take on Ecuador, with FIFA hoping action on the pitch will turn the spotlight away from complaints over the Arab nation's human rights record. England captain Harry Kane is expected to wear his One Love rainbow armband, showing support for LGBTQ people during tomorrow's match against Iran. In total, 9 countries are said to be making the same gesture. Amnesty's Nina Navid told us she hopes the Iranian players use the platform to support women's rights.
So I very much hope that the players will do something. And if the players are not able to, because it's fair to say that professional athletes are no exception to the regime's brutality against their own people, our hope is that opposition players, so the England players, may do something in solidarity with women and girls in Iran.
The Housing Secretary has written to every English council leader and social housing provider warning that deaths like that of Awab Ishak must never happen again. The 2-year-old died as a result of prolonged exposure to mould whilst living in social housing. The chief executive of Rochdale Borough-wide Housing, Gareth Swarbrick, was sacked yesterday due to the council's handling of the issue. Michael Gove says the country must raise the bar dramatically on the quality of housing and ensure tenants' voices are heard. Elon Musk has reinstated Donald Trump's Twitter account after putting the decision to a vote on the social media platform. 51.8% of Twitter users voted yes in an online poll that received more than 15 million votes. The former president was suspended from the social media platform in January 2021 after a pro-Trump group attacked the US Capitol. It comes just days after Mr. Trump announced his plans to run for president in 2024. Well, after negotiations through the night, an agreement has now been reached at COP27 to help poor countries deal with the impact of climate change. The so-called Loss and Damage Fund will help developing nations bear the cost of disasters such as drought and flooding. However, a decision on exactly which countries should pay has been left until COP28 next year. But United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres says the deal is not good enough.
I welcome the decision to establish a loss and damage fund and to operationalize it in the coming period. Clearly, this will not be enough, but it is a much-needed political signal to rebuild broken trust. The voices of those on the front lines of the climate crisis must be heard.
The government is denying reports that it's considering negotiating a Swiss-style trading relationship with Europe. Switzerland's trade agreements with the EU give them direct access to parts of the internal market. However, it would take the UK 10 years to change to that deal. Downing Street sources have rejected the claims. New measures introduced today will give longer prison sentences to terrorists if they commit crimes while behind bars. All offences, however minor, will automatically be referred for a police investigation and potential prosecution. The Ministry of Justice says this will increase the likelihood that they stay in prison for longer and create bigger deterrence against further offending. And members of Animal Rebellion occupied Gordon Ramsay's 3 Michelin star restaurant last night. The climate activists held mock menus outlining the environmental costs of items served at restaurant Gordon Ramsay in Chelsea. The group issued a statement saying they're campaigning for a plant-based food system. A spokesperson for the restaurant called the protest incredibly inappropriate and deeply disrespectful. You're watching GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Portillo.
Thank you, Ray. Well, London is the capital of the United Kingdom, but should it wish to be the capital of the arts world too? Earlier this month, Arts Council England, the main funding body for the arts, announced that it was reallocating its budget for the next 3 years to support organisations in regional centres rather than in and around the capital. Some venues, including the celebrated Donmar Warehouse Theatre in London, have lost all their government funding, while others will see it cut by a half. The English National Opera has seen its £12.8 million annual budget reduced to zero. What art should be funded in a recession? Is this levelling up, or will Britain simply end up with less excellence? I'm able to talk now to Dr. Harry Brunges, who is chair of the English National Opera, joining me from, I think, Sussex. Hello, Dr. Brunges.
Morning.
Does this effectively bring the curtain down on the English National Opera?
It will bring the curtain down on English National Opera at its home, the London Coliseum. It's been our home for 55 years, and as a company, we are approaching our centenary. So there's not been a more dramatic or operatic dramatic moment in the history of the company.
There was some talk of you moving to Manchester. Is that an idea that's been well thought through? Is it something that's been planned over months?
Well, the whole day, which was now, 10 days ago, Stuart Murphy, the chief executive, and myself were summoned to the headquarters of the Arts Council on Tottenham Court Road. And we've had a very good relationship with the Arts Council in recent years, an important stakeholder, valued stakeholder. And we sat down and unexpectedly were told that because of the Levelling Up agenda and having to take money out of London, they had decided to remove English National Opera from the NPO. So as you said at the top there, 12.8 million would go. And then there was an atypical moment when they discussed Manchester. And it wasn't relocation. The precise word they used was reconfiguration over a period of 3 years. And for us to sort of have a startup company, starting from scratch, to develop a strategy for a different type of arts organisation, which, if successful, could return to the national portfolio in 2026. With a few £1 million a year. So this conversation was now 30 seconds old. And then at 60 seconds, they said, where were you thinking of? And they said the factory in Manchester, which they weren't aware of. Opera North, who are our sister company in the north of England, knew nothing of it. And nor did the Manchester City Council, City Administration. So the whole thing, there was no feasibility study, there was no information memorandum, there was no opera review, there was no paper. It was just an idea, presumably, which executives at the Arts Council thought would be of interest. I mean, we were astonished to lose our money. We're astonished by the idea. And and it's not fair on E&O, and it's not fair on Manchester. Manchester's a major city, great cultural and theatrical antecedents. Bridgewater Hall, the Opera House, the Palace, Dance Warehouse, it's the Lowry, and a place I visit every month. I mean, I've been chairing companies there for 25 years, and I just don't see why Manchester should have a company which London's decided to close. So we were very uneven about the whole thing, but we're quite clear where we are with it now.
Yeah. Tell me some of the things that you've been doing over the years to counter the accusation that is made against opera of being elitist. How have you been trying to open opera up?
Well, the principle of E&O was from Lillian Bayliss, Michael, who you will know, and it was opera for everybody, and the company's existed since 1931. So there's no social or financial impediment to come in to see opera at the London Coliseum. We have free tickets for under 21s, and 18,000 individuals have taken that up as far afield as Penrith to Penzance, from Scotland, from Northern Ireland and Ireland. We charge £10 for under 35s. Every year, 51% of our audience are first-time bookers. So we break down the barriers. There's nothing to... Anybody coming into the London Coliseum to see E&O production will feel comfortable and feel easy. There's no dress code. And we are very pleased with our diverse audience, our diverse company. And on top of that, all the work we have been doing in recent years outside of the London Coliseum, across the country, long before the word or the expression levelling up became fashionable.
Just tell people why it is that an opera house cannot survive without £12.8 million in grant per year.
Opera is, and always has been, an expensive art form. It's main-scale, large production. We have just like any other opera house in the world, I mean, we are a company with an international world-class reputation. Besides the productions on main stage in St Martin's Lane, at any one time, 10 of our productions will be on stage somewhere around the world, at the Met, the Lyric, Chicago, Milan, Paris, 70-piece orchestra. We have 45 in chorus, and we have a full technical costume team, front to house, administration, music department, development, outreach, community work. So there's over 300 full-time staff at the London Coliseum and 300 part-time staff. And if this does come to pass, this idea and this removal of money will mean 600 redundancies for people living in London who have a job associated with the London Coliseum and English National Opera.
In the interest of balance, I'm just going to say to viewers that the Chief Executive of Arts Council England, Darren Henley, issued a long statement, and in part of that he said, "I know too that today will be hard for those organisations who had hoped for a different decision. For those organisations who are leaving the portfolio, there will be the chance to apply for help from our transition programme. And our new Transform programme will be available to help current national portfolio organisations who have seen their funding reduced to reshape their business model." That obviously covers the English National Opera and the idea that it might move to Manchester. I was rather astonished, as you were, by the idea, because we do have opera in the north of England. We have Opera North based at Leeds. Manchester is not so very far away. So the suggestion seems to be that that London cannot bear two opera companies, but that the north of England could in two cities which are quite close to each other.
Michael, who might argue with you? Can I just come back on that statement from Darren Henley? It's not relocation to Manchester. The word is reconfiguration. The 600 staff associated with the London Coliseum won't be going to Manchester. It's envisaged a small business, a new sort of business, like an art hat business, with maybe 14 or 15 people. We're not talking 600 people going to Manchester.
That is a very useful clarification. Harry Brunges, Dr. Harry Brunges, who is the chair of English National Opera, thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Coming up, he's back as he's as defiant as ever. Will Donald Trump make it all the way to the White House for the second time? That's after the break.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It was one of the least surprising political announcements in recent times. Donald Trump says he will once again run for President of the United States. It makes him only the second president to seek 2 non-consecutive terms.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
Well, plenty of cheers, but will the Republican Party still want him? After all, after 2 impeachment attempts and with an ongoing inquiry into the January 6th riot at the Capitol, plus an FBI investigation into the removal of classified documents to his Florida home, some Republican voters may not relish the drama of a Trump campaign. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis could be an alternative choice. His tough opposition to wokery is proving popular amongst Republicans. In a moment, we'll speak with Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes, former Vice President of Republicans Overseas. But first, joining me from Washington is Dr. Sebastian Gorka, former strategist to President Trump, host of the national radio show America First. Very good to speak to you. Thanks for coming on to GB News. It's rather strange that the president made his announcement so shortly after results for the Republicans, which were much less good than had been hoped, and at a time when many Republicans were putting the blame on former President Trump.
Well, as you said, Michael, this is not a surprise to anybody. Everybody who is awake and had a pulse knew that he was going to announce. He didn't want to distract from the elections, the midterms, which, by the way, sacked the Speaker of the House. So, no, it wasn't the massive tidal wave some had predicted, but the Democrats have lost the lower house here in Washington, D.C., and right now the Senate is tied. We have one race that had to go to a second round that will be decided in early December. But no, this is an inevitability that the man who received more votes than any other incumbent president in history was always going to run, and now it's official.
But the Republicans are not going to take the Senate because the vice president will make sure that it stays Democrat. The Republicans do have the House, that's true, but it seemed like not a very good night for Donald Trump. He had endorsed 5 candidates for the House of Representatives in toss-up seats, and none of those won. He had supported the Senate and gubernatorial candidate in Pennsylvania and the gubernatorial candidates in Michigan, New York and Wisconsin, and all of those were defeated. And that's led to quite a lot of Republicans speaking out against him in a way that we've not been used to for some time.
Well, if you listen to his speech, I was there in Mar-a-Lago. He actually gave the gross numbers. He didn't focus on individual races. He had 223 wins and 23 losses. So I would say that's a pretty good result to have of all his endorsements, more than 220 wins and then 22 very visible ones, perhaps, not win. That is a record that anybody would be proud of. But yes, I mean, there are what we call them here rhinos, Republicans in name. The establishment who don't like the idea of this non-politician coming back. But at the end of the day, you know, there is no politician on left or right in America who can do what he does. Right now, President Trump could announce, I'm giving a rally anywhere in America, including Democrat states like California, and he could fill a stadium, Michael, with 50, 60,000 people like that. He could announce it that I'm having a rally tomorrow, and he could have those people in the stadium. Nobody can do that. Not Ron DeSantis, not even Obama. So, you know, that is a power of mobilization we haven't seen since the likes of Eisenhower, and that's why he will most likely be the nominee for the Republicans in 2 years' time.
Now, I perfectly understand that he can fill a stadium, but of course, to win the presidency, you need to collect millions and millions of votes. Ron DeSantis won in Florida, I think, by 16 percentage points, where Trump had scored, I think, less than a 4 percentage point advantage. So for Republicans looking at who would perform best on the night, they might conclude that it was DeSantis, not Trump.
Well, I always find this very peculiar because I always ask people who raise this canard, why is Ron DeSantis so successful? And he is. I mean, he has been a very good governor for Florida. What model is he following? There's only one model he's following. He's not a Mitt Romney. He's not wet. He's not a rhino. He is, you know, like the Austin Powers movie, Michael. He is the mini-me to Donald Trump. He has taken Trumpian politics, very aggressive, you know, anti-establishment, anti-woke media politics to Florida. So the idea that the person who's the smaller version of the original model should replace the model, it beggars belief. It makes no sense. It's asinine.
Sebastian Gorka, thank you. There is a small question of age, which I'll raise now with Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes, who was the European advisor to Trump's 2020 campaign. He will be 78, I believe, if he is the candidate for the presidency in 2024. Have not Americans had enough of geriatric presidents?
You know, that's sort of a strange question to ask because some people think, yes, we need to go to someone much younger. But the fact is that Trump came out at this point announcing his candidacy because he knew and he wanted to test who was going to be against him. And that is part of why we have this corrupt media. You could go to Wikipedia and find Operation Mockingbird, that the CIA has been in there forever. Then Obama repealed the 1948 Smith-Mundt Act, which then permitted propaganda to be in broadcasting. It no longer said that it had to be credible. And so when he came out and said fake news, he warned us at the end of his speech that it is going to be very hard. The establishment, the media, the globalists are all going to come after. They're going to try to intimidate, but he needed to smoke him out. And guess what happened? The next day, Congress, on the Democrat side, wanted to create a law that he couldn't run. Then what happened was the Republicans came out and said they were going to investigate Hunter Biden. And Friday, the Department of Justice, AG, I'd like to forget his name, and I would, yeah, I do. I can't remember it right now. I mean, I can see his face, you know, but what did he do? He launched an investigation and he put the most corrupt prosecutor who hates Trump on it.
I'm very much against wokery. So with this, I'm with Donald Trump and I'm with Ron DeSantis. But one of the things I don't like about wokery is that it sort of encourages people to see themselves as victims. In everything that you've said just now, you've identified Donald Trump as a sort of victim. Is that really the way that he wishes to present himself? Doesn't he wish to present himself as you know, a kind of big man?
I don't think he sees himself as a victim, but he has been victimized, and that is the difference. It's just the same as I was reading an article this morning, and they said, oh, he suffered this incredible defeat. What we were working on was taking over school boards. We wanted to get Nancy Pelosi out. We wanted local councils. Yes, he had 23 out of 235 that didn't win their seats. Yes, it was governors. Yes, it was some senators. But Donald Trump actually plays chess on a 5D level, and you never can anticipate what his next move is going to be.
Well, we talked about Ron DeSantis and how popular he is for his war on wokery. Let's hear what he has to say about that.
We have embraced freedom. We have maintained law and order. We have protected the rights of parents. We have respected our taxpayers, and we reject woke ideology. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die.
Florida is where woke goes to die. Dr. Jan, aren't you attracted by that?
Look, I know Ron DeSantis, and actually when we had some issues for expats on tax, he was very, very helpful with us. Right now, I think it's parallel to Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, that when 2016, everyone was hot on him just like they're hot on Ron DeSantis. And the thing is, yes, he's done an incredible job, and I think he's an incredible role model for other governors, but will it translate across other states? And that is to be seen, because American politics sometimes changes the next day. You never know what to anticipate. But let me go back to you saying about Trump coming across as a victim. I'm sorry that you interpreted it that way, because that's not really it. And I really want people to understand that they need to go to other sources, because the media will not tell you about his successes. They will not tell you about anything that he does positively. They'll not tell you about his executive orders, 13848. They won't tell you about some of the other articles that he did. They won't tell you about the devolution, the continuity of government plan that he put in. The reason that his Mar-a-Lago was seized upon was that they really wanted to get the PEDS, the Presidential Emergency Act, document, which is only what Trump knows and the military, that he had to put in place, because before he left, he declared 2 national emergencies. And you know what? Biden hasn't reversed that. Biden has signed on to 3 of his executive orders to continue them going. So we have some very fascinating things that are going to come out in the next 60 to 90 days.
In this media slot, we've just spoken to 2 Trump supporters, so no complaints from your side, I imagine, about this. But just going back to the results, you see you've gone for low-hanging fruit. It's true that Nancy Pelosi is out, but, you know, that was eminently achievable. It's true that quite a lot of candidates endorsed by Trump won, but they were mostly candidates in seats whose result was known in advance. In the House seats, which were toss-ups, he backed 5 candidates and they all lost. So please admit it, the results were not what Donald Trump hoped for.
You know, when you say low-hanging fruit, I really object to that interpretation, because one of the things that we looked at for the local and for school boards is that all of the grooming that was going on, the drag queen story time, the amount of critical race theory, which basically tells anyone who's not white and white that you're useless, you will never succeed. We needed to reverse in those ways, because the Department of Education has just absolutely let the National Association of Teachers destroy our students, destroy their self-esteem, not even teach them anything. And that is really some of the important things. And people aren't looking at the state of the United States from the standpoint of stagflation, from the fact that some people are unable to even eat more than 2 meals a day because they want to put petrol in their car. We've got to look at those things.
Thank you. Those are indeed broad and very important issues, and ones that, on the whole, we don't discuss very much in the United Kingdom. So, Dr. Jan, thank you very much indeed, and also many thanks to Sebastian Gorka, who was on before. Coming up, the art of being a ghostwriter. How do you find another person's voice? That's after the headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Michael. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. In the US, 5 people have been killed and 18 injured in a shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs. According to a statement on the club's Facebook page, a number of heroic customers were able to subdue the male shooter. They're describing it as a hate attack. Police officials say a suspect is in custody and receiving treatment for their injuries. The FIFA World Cup kicks off in Qatar today, the first time the event has been held in the Middle East. The opening match will see the home side take on Ecuador, with FIFA hoping the focus will now turn away from complaints over the Arab nation's human rights record. Players from 9 countries, including England captain Harry Kane, plan to wear a One Love armband, showing support for LGBTQ people. The Housing Secretary has written to every English council leader and social housing provider, warning that deaths like that of Awab Ishaq must never happen again. The 2-year-old died as a result of prolonged exposure to mould whilst living in social housing. Michael Gove says the country must raise the bar dramatically on the quality of housing available. Elon Musk has reinstated Donald Trump's Twitter account after putting the decision to a vote on the social media platform. 51.8% of Twitter users clicked yes in an online poll that received more than 15 million votes. The former president was suspended in January 2021 after a pro-Trump group attacked the US Capitol. And after negotiations through the night, an agreement has been reached at COP27 to help poor countries deal with the impact of climate change. The Loss and Damage Fund will help developing nations bear the cost of disasters such as droughts and flooding. However, a decision on exactly which countries should pay has been left until COP28 next year. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is the People's Channel, GB News. Time now for Michael.
Thank you, Ray. The chances are that there will be at least one book in your Christmas stocking. around a third of all books are sold in the 10 weeks leading up to Christmas. For biographies and autobiographies, that proportion is even higher. In 2019, 43% of revenue came in the run-up to Christmas. In the industry, it's a closely guarded secret, but it's thought that at least half, and it could be as many as 90% of all autobiographies are written by ghosts. Simon Petherick is a ghostwriter, and he joins me now. You've made a pretty good living from being a ghostwriter, is that right?
I have for quite some time, yes, yeah.
And there is a decent living in it?
There is, as long as you do it professionally. I mean, there's a sort of scale of ghostwriting from down there to sort of the more professional people who earn a living, but...
No, I'm sure you're right up there.
Not right up there, but yeah.
Tell me about the sorts of people for whom you have ghost written.
They vary hugely. I've written for, you know, what you would call celebrities, very successful business people. 3 years ago, I quite bizarrely ended up writing the memoir of the head of the military of a quite volatile African state, which was quite entertaining because I wasn't allowed to talk to him. So I'd sort of send in questions saying what did the general feel about his school life, and they'd come back and they'd say, you know, the general was very happy at school.
That must have been very difficult because presumably what you'd like to do is to sit down just as you and I are at the moment and make me talk about my childhood and how I saw various things in my lifetime. And when do you actually start writing? Presumably only after you've spoken to someone for quite a long time, is that right?
No, absolutely, you're absolutely right. What I normally try and do is not write anything for at least 2 months. So I like to just sit. If it was you, we'd sit, we spend time together, go to the pub, you might walk around your old childhood estate or you know, and just chat. And the idea really is just to listen. And it's only through listening that you start picking up two things, really. One is the way that the person likes to communicate and the way they are authentic in the way they communicate. And also you start working out what it is they actually want to talk about. Because it often turns out they want to talk about things they didn't say they wanted to talk about at the start. And that often happens.
And why is it that they can't do it for themselves?
Well, a lot of very successful people, if they're sports people, business people, musicians, I mean, all kinds of... They're very, very successful in their area. There's no particular reason why they should be good at crafting a story. And crafting a story is a specific skill. You know, from Homer onwards, there are certain kind of, you know, guidelines on how you retain a reader's interest and how you maintain authenticity, and that's storytelling. And you know, why should someone who's made multi-millions running a huge global empire know how to tell a story? So for me, it's like bringing in a plumber. You know, you're not going to fix your boiler yourself, are you? Unless you're a bit of a daredevil. So you bring in a storyteller.
Tell me a bit more about that phenomenon you described a moment ago, where it turns out that the person didn't quite know what story they wanted to tell, that emerges in your conversation. I mean, obviously you can't refer to people by name, but you might have an example of that.
Yes, it is very interesting. One really lovely chap. I mean, what's interesting about the process is you often stay in touch and remain friends with people. And in fact, this chap I'm talking about, I'm having lunch with him next week, but I worked with him 3 years ago. He made a lot of money in business, in the, let's call it the consumer goods business, sold a business for a lot of money. And what was very interesting was he wanted ostensibly to talk about how he'd done it so he could pass on some guidelines to people on how they could succeed in business. And also, I think he wanted to say, you know, look, I've done pretty well, and why shouldn't he? He had done well. But actually what had emerged as we were talking was that a lot of the drive for him came from the fact that his father had left the family when he was 8 years old. And that really came out. And by the end of it, you know, that was a really solid theme. And I think he was pleased with that, but probably hadn't realised this was the moment he wanted to talk about it.
So you're halfway to being a psychotherapist by the sound of it.
I wouldn't go there. I'm a listener. You know,
Yeah.
In the modern world, we don't have time to listen, do you? So it's quite a privilege, you know, just sitting, listening to people.
So we've been talking about ghostwriters in a very discreet way. You're not talking about with whom you've been working. But some ghostwriters are out there. For instance, we know that Prince Harry has a ghostwriter, don't we?
Well, we do. It's going to be fascinating, I think. J.R. Moeringer, he's called. And... He is right up there. You know, we understand, I don't know, what we understand is being paid somewhere between $1 million and $3 million for this. We know he spent at least a year with Harry talking to him. And what's really interesting about it is, I think you're talking about the kind of psychoanalytic element of it. I think this is very much the case here, because if you look at Meiringer's track record, and he is a great writer, he became known for his own memoir called The Tender Bar, which is about his difficult relationship with a distant father. He then went on and worked for Andre Agassi and did his autobiography, which strangely talked about Andre's difficult relationship with his father, and now he's talking to Prince Harry. So, one can only suspect he's got a bit of psychological skin in the game.
I'm very interested in the numbers you've mentioned, between $1 and $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads me to ponder, I mean, how much might that book make for its author?
Oh, I think it'll be huge. I mean,
what do you mean by huge?
Well, I suspect he'll be directing quite a lot of it into charity, but I think you could assume that he'd be making $20, $30 million out of that. Yeah. Because the way publishing works is that, they focus all their attention on the big books these days, much more than they used to. So they will just swamp the world, and there'll be world rights in that book.
And from a fee like that, you can spare 10% to the ghostwriter?
Yeah. And it sort of trickles down that way to where people like me operate, doing celebrity and famous people's memoirs. It's a kind of a 10%-ish,
Yeah. Are you aware of any other autobiographies or biographies that are approaching publication coming out to Christmas, or that are published coming out to Christmas?
I'm not sure about coming up to this Christmas. I mean, there is a big fiction book coming out, because I think people will be surprised to know how many best-selling novels are actually ghostwritten. And there is one very successful male best-selling novelist whose modus operandi is, when he has an idea for a story, he gets the team over. He has a team of ghostwriters, and he sort of walks around in a smoking jacket and tells them the story, and then they go off and write it, and then it comes back to him. Which for me is it's fine.
I mean, I was rather surprised to see that Paul Newman, his diaries are coming out now. I think Paul Newman died all the way back in 2008, and these are diaries. I assume they don't get ghost rewritten.
No, they wouldn't. I mean, American publishing, on the whole, has always tended to be much more hands-on and, dare I say it, professional, actually. The great American editors, like the editor of Thomas Wolfe, the editors for Hemingway, people like that, would have involved themselves much more in the actual words. So I suspect they've had a very good American editor who has probably cleaned it up here and there. Yeah.
And, of course, we've got a new book from Michelle Obama. Is that, by the way, is Michelle Obama's second book worth more than Prince Harry's, do you think?
Difficult to tell.
Really? I would have thought certainly yes, no?
I don't know. I think people are going to be surprised by Harry's book, because I know there's a certain sense of, oh, God, why doesn't he shut up? But I think it could be a fascinating book, and it could surprise people, I think.
Simon, such a pleasure to talk to you, and good luck with your future work.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, forget the champers, it's time for English sparkling wine. Sales have shot up over the last few years. We find out the secret to producing very English bubbles after the break.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's time to put the stopper on French champagne. Homegrown bubbly is on the rise in taste, in quality and in popularity. Supermarket Sainsbury reported sales of English sparkling wine are up more than half in the last 3 years. And taking Coles to Newcastle, one English sparkling wine is now offered in the world-famous Georges V Hotel in Paris. Coates and Seeley began making sparkling wine just over a decade ago, and I went to meet the team that makes a very English fizz. I am in the North Hampshire Downs, and the River Test runs through the valley at the bottom of this slope. And this part of the world now rivals the Champagne region of France. Apparently, the combination of chalky soil and cool climate produces magnificent sparkling wine. Nicholas Coates started a new career 13 years ago and is the co-founder of Coates and Seeley Winemakers. Nicholas, why does it turn out that you can grow great wines in southern England?
It's largely to do with the chalk. So the chalk that underlies much of the downland of southern England is the same chalk that underlies Champagne, Paris Basin. So it's largely a similarity of soil type, but it's also a cool climate. To make great champagne, make great sparkling wine, you need relatively high levels of acidity in the fruit. And to achieve that, you need a cool climate. So it is this congruence of chalk soils and cool climate that allow us to do what we're doing here.
But it seems that maybe for a couple of thousand years, it's been a bit too cool in England.
Even 20 years ago, it would have been quite difficult to do what we're doing now on a commercial basis. But there's no question that the relative warming that has occurred over the last 20 years has brought us to the right side of what is still a reasonably marginal climate.
And we're plodding up a slope. So is the slope and the orientation of the slope important too?
Slope's important because the ripening of these grapes in this country, typically in September, largely in September, by then the sun is quite low. So a flat field is going to get a lot less sunlight than a field on a slope. So it's simple geometry. So the orientation, south facing and the slope are both important facets.
What brought you into this business?
Well, I was an investment banker for 25 years, and I decided at age 47 I didn't want to die a banker. But I very much wanted to go and start my own business, and I wanted to do something closer to home so I could actually see more of my family. And I have always loved wine, and I knew we had chalk slopes around my home. And Christian Seeley, the eponymous Seeley of Coates and Seeley, is a very old friend, and we just happened to have the same idea at the same time. We both thought to ourselves, well, we have the same soil as Champagne, we have a highly comparable climate. If we bring in great winemakers, why can't we do here what they do over there?
Shall we see what you do with the fruit?
Yes, we should go down to the winery, have a look at what we do, and perhaps taste some wines at the end of it.
Nicholas, you've obviously made a significant investment here in very modern-looking machinery.
So we're in the Coates and Seeley winery, and on our right we have fermentation tanks, stainless steel and concrete eggs. And on our left, we have bottles ready for disgorgement. So these are largely ready, these bottles. They've got one more step in the process to go, and they will be ready to drink in 6 months from now.
It is exciting. I mean, look at this. Méthode Britannique. It's such a great expression, isn't it?
Yes.
You promised me some juices?
Yes.
Let's go
let's
try
go
those.
and do it.
So you're standing protectively by your concrete egg. What happens in there?
Oh, it's just starting a fermentation here.
What's in there apart from juice? Just juice?
Just juice, yes. We separated the juice with 2 batches. So the first is the free run juice, and we have another one which is the hard press. And we keep just the free run, so the best of the best.
Nicholas, what are you getting from this now?
Well, as Andres said, the key is that the sugars and the acidity are in perfect balance. There's a wonderful harmony. There's something about this year, it's a very, very hot, sweet year. There's almost something slightly tropical, perhaps a sort of hint of lychee. There's a complexity here, which is very exciting, as well as a harmony.
So when you have the juice at first and you're tasting the juice, it's not always the same flavor and everything when you're starting during the fermentation, after the fermentation. So it's changing pretty much each hours and each day. This is why we're tasting all of the wines every 6 or 7 hours and just monitoring all the time how is the sugar level is dropping and the alcohol level is rising.
This is a borderline between science and art.
Yes, somewhere there. Each harvest is a slightly difference, and especially this one is, I think, is a very promising harvest for here.
Well, 2022 wasn't very good for many people, so
good for something at last.
I'm very glad that you guys are happy. Tristram, we're in this magnificent vintage bus. Is this part of selling the wine?
Absolutely. Albion has become an essential part of our sales strategy. And being such a great British object, it's very fitting for what we're trying to do here in Hampshire.
I think you're wrestling with a lot of prejudices that people have built up. I mean, I personally, whenever I've been able to afford it, I go and buy a bottle that says Champagne.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's, better than Prosecco, better than Cava. But you're wrestling with the idea that your English wines are equivalent and better than Champagne.
Absolutely. Well, look, there is still that preconception that English wines are filthy and are not something of quality at all. But what we've seen in the last 15 years especially is a real acknowledgement from influential people and opinion formers in the market that some of the English sparkling wines being produced now are of, incredible quality. And we see, the best testament to that is where our wines are drunk. So you can find our wines in some of London's best restaurants, in the George Sank in Paris, which is the only English wine ever drunk there. And I think that more and more people are starting to acknowledge in the market that England produce something really great. We very much like to celebrate our connection to Champagne. Ultimately, we are taking the craft that they have championed over many hundreds of years, and we are championing that on English soil. And we are quite proud of our French links. A lot of our winemakers are French. They come from a Champagne background. And I think that's been, very instrumental in ensuring that the wines of Coates and Seeley, reach that optimum level of quality. So we take our hats off to the French.
Nicholas, a big moment whenever the cork comes out?
I love it. These are like my children. And this is a particularly rosy-cheeked child. It's a great favourite. So you're very good health.
It's been lovely to spend this time with you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for coming. It's been a lot of fun.
That rosy-cheeked child made me an instant convert to English sparkling wine. Many thanks indeed to Coates and Seeley for hosting me that day. Alistair Stewart, that was all in Hampshire. Do you know anything about Hampshire?
I live in Hampshire. I was born in Hampshire, and it's one of my favourite counties, without doubt. You should have come for tea, but I think when the option was fine Hampshire English champagne, I can see the temptation.
Do you know about English wine? Are you also a convert to English wine?
I'm not terribly knowledgeable about it, although isn't Michael Ashcroft, the former Tory treasurer, I think he's got a vineyard as well and does sparkling wine.
I was very convinced that the quality of that was a good deal better than the quality of, you know, your kind of average bottle of champagne. And by the way, the price reflects it too.
Yeah. Also, a tiny footnote, they're incredibly supportive of charities in Hampshire as well. If we have a big event, they very often say have a case or two, which is so lovely.
I'm reminded that as I took the train back from Hampshire, Liz Truss was resigning. Yes, was resigning. I did that a few weeks ago. Well, what an extraordinary period it's been since, and that may be reflected in your programme, which begins at noon.
Yes, but there's an interesting segue, because it has been the most extraordinary period, going back to July and the toppling of Boris Johnson, the death of the late Queen, more Prime Ministers than you can shake a bottle of decent Hampshire champagne at. It has been extraordinary, but I feel very strongly, as your programme did earlier on, when you were talking to our mutual friend Dee Miller, that the autumn statement is seeking to redefine an awful lot of what we're doing. But within it, there were two particularly interesting tweaks, as it were. And Steve Barclay has been out and about on television this morning and is in the Mail on Sunday talking about it. One is more money for the health service. And people, oh, God, don't they have enough? But he's saying, but let's shake up efficiencies. Let's really have a go at middle... Well, you do that.
I do that. I completely do that, because they've forgotten to say it for the last few years, but they said it for many decades before that.
Yeah.
There has been no attempt by this government to manage the health service at all.
And lo and behold, twisting that, who do they go to as their principal advisor on it? Patricia Hewitt, who we both remember from the Tony Blair days. But
yes,
we've got a guy
and forgive me, I mean, chivalry apart, you know, I'm not bowled over by the choice of Patricia Hewitt. I think it's a gimmick getting a Labour former Secretary
Did you know that she used to be a director of Bupa?
No, I didn't.
Well, there you are, you see.
That's a feather in her cap.
It is indeed.
But I thought it was yet another gimmick.
Bigger feather in the cap of my principal guest on that subject, and it's Dr. Andrew Vallance-Owen, who's an old mate of mine going way back to university days. And he's a former NHS surgeon, but he's also former medical director of Bupa. So my question to him is not so much yours, we're perfectly reasonable about why now. It's how can they actually do it? The other one is education and the desire to skill up our young people. So those are our two big topics.
I hope you'll pursue the idea of comparisons between the private and public sector in health. Thanks to all my guests today. Have a wonderful Sunday. See you next week. Alistair is next. Bye-bye.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK will be wet and cloudy in the east with rain clearing, sunshine and showers in the west. Here are the details. Across southwest England, after a dry start to the day, blustery showers will spread eastwards. These could be heavy at times, with a risk of a thunderstorm for western coasts. Cloud and rain will linger across southeast England at first, though once this clears, it will be a dry morning with some sunny spells. There'll be a mixture of sunshine and scattered blustery showers across South Wales this morning. These showers could be heavy and thundery. After early rain and cloud clears, it will be a dry and fine start across the Midlands, with sunny spells. Scattered showers that could be heavy at times will affect the west later. Cloud and rain will clear northeast England through the first part of the morning.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GBNews. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.